like this has been a time in tech where I've been like the most anxious and excited because there's new tools and things to play around with like literally every day. I feel like,
Yes.
I'm
Agreed.
finding something new. At the same time, what I've tried to do from a career perspective and also kind of interest within tech and the space and just being out in Silicon Valley is try to think, 5, 10 years down the lane. All right, if this is what's happening now, what does that mean for humanity or where we're at in tech? And not being super profound, but just trying to position myself thoughtfully and professionally to take advantage of trends. And it feels increasingly difficult to do that
Yeah.
with context from the actual technology and then macro events and economic events. Anybody who's saying they got it all figured out, like I don't believe it, but it's crazy, man, just how quickly things are changing.
3, 2, 1, go!
What is up, Rush Hour Podcast? I'm TW. This is Justin. What's going on, man? Happy New Year for those that celebrate it. I know you
Yeah.
don't, but it's a big deal for me. I thought a lot going on in the news today. I thought I'd start out with a little story. My buddy Dave Chu in Taiwan, who's a dear friend and listener, said, "Hey, could you tell the story about?" Yeah, shout out Dave. Love you, Dave. And he said, "Can you tell the story of Gymshark?" I don't know if you've heard of this. But back
Very,
in
very
2000,
yeah.
yeah, but let me give you the quick rundown. So back in 2012, a kid named Ben Francis, I say kid respectfully, he was 19 in 2012. Big gym aficionado, was really into fitness. And he thought to himself, hey, the gym clothing is kind of rough. Like it doesn't speak to me like a lot of the clothes I like to wear. I like real athleisure wear that would fit my style. So he started doing some research. He looked at Nike and Under Armour and all these, and you're like, hey, these are kind of generic and cheesy. Maybe I can bring some more style and culture to athleisure wear, I guess is what you call it, or gym
Yeah.
wear, like
Yeah.
fitness wear. So he was obviously into the social media and fitness world with YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all the people he followed. He created some designs and sent them out to his favorite quote unquote micro influencers, right? The guys in the fitness world who aren't necessarily huge. This is like 2012, kind of the beginning of sort of the vlogging, um, sort of Instagram world where things are really starting to pick up. And he got in early. He sent them notes. He told them how much he loves their content, sent them some cool gear that he made. And it really made everyone feel like, hey, I'm a part of this brand and it's growing. And the moment that it took off in 2013, there was a big fitness conference that was coming. And he sent everybody gear and he filled up his booth with it. And then he invited all the influencers in to his booth to meet the fans, their fans. So it was a huge hit. He went into this event and he sold a ton of gear. He got his name out there. People came to see the influencers, liked the shirts they were wearing, got a nice vibe from everybody and started buying the gear. And then he took, that concept of making cool gear and like Supreme and like others before them with hype culture, he made limited drops, had the influencers advertise, gave them gear and just did that whole cycle over and over and grew it to $1 billion business.
That's
And now
crazy.
Gymshark is huge. It's like up there. It rivals, in terms of that style of gear. It's everywhere. I've definitely seen it around. I know I've seen it on TikTok and YouTube over the years. It's called Gymshark. It's fascinating that he took essentially a micro influencer strategy plus a supply and demand from hype clothing and material and combine those two worlds. And then obviously over COVID and all these things, it just took off and is a massive business now. So having said all that, my question to you is, can a company like this, can someone, a listener of ours, do this today? Or is there some learnings from this style that can work in today's social media world? And truly, because micro influence and the way the algorithms have changed in the last year, I'm not convinced it can be done, at least not as seamlessly. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear what you
Yeah.
think.
Well, I think that there's no better time for people to kind of just start businesses and go out and do something anyway, because I feel like the platforms and the tools and, distribution channels through social media, et cetera, are kind of like all there at your fingertips in a way that they weren't even necessarily 10 years ago, like at least in the same way in terms of being able to access people and influencer marketing being a real practice. So, to that end, I feel like, I feel like you could replicate a business, kind of starting from scratch within that model if you're willing to hustle and you have a bit of a unique insight. I think that the challenge that may exist now relative to that 2012 period is there are a lot more people trying to execute that same strategy.
Yes.
And they have access to things like Shopify and they have just like the ways in which you can connect with influencers, et cetera. It's way more seamless than what it was before. So I just say that to say influencers themselves are probably being inundated all the time by like different merch and
Right.
like, I think that the distribution strategy can still work. I think that the ease of converting people based on the outreach is probably harder because there are way more right micro influencers who are regularly working with brands or individuals or have that kind of outreach. I think that's where the challenge is this, that like it's a known tactic. It's like a pretty well known tactic now. So more people can, participate, and when more people can participate or know about it, then that just makes the competition, harder for you to kind of cut through the noise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the stuff that still applies today is obviously him finding a passion, right? He loves fitness, and he literally with himself could not find the gear that he wanted. So he went out and made it. I think that still applies today. If you're like, hey, I'm in this world, I'm in this sort of niche, and I can't find the thing that I want, I'm going to go make it. I still think you could do it. I think you're right. Everyone is now executing these little micro influencer strategies. So it makes it a lot more challenging. I think it's just one of the things you have to do. It's not the thing you have to do now.
Totally.
To get it underway, right?
Yeah, I think so. One of the other things we talk about a lot is like venture scale businesses and opportunities versus you want to create a lifestyle business or you just want to kind of start out and doing something. It's two very different models of how to approach those things. So I think that, for the everyday entrepreneur who's trying to kind of start out and just create a business and use that as a channel, absolutely. For someone who's trying to create a venture backable business model through that strategy, it's just like way larger of a kind of an operations lift to do all that and kind of cut through the noise than previously. Do you know, is Gymshark, is it a publicly traded company now, or is it still privately held? Or
I think he's still privately owned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still privately owned, but he's, come out with some numbers in terms of value. I think he did a valuation and a raise. That's where the $1 billion plus came from.
Yeah.
So it's really impressive. I mean, there was a time there where athleisure was really a thing. I think Gap tried it and others have tried it. Obviously Lululemon did it, but there was the time where you needed it, especially there. I'm just thinking of 2012 was such a great time to start it because like you take all those learnings and you come into COVID with momentum and a brand that you can like step on the gas when everybody's at home watching all these influencers and they pick up, then your stuff's going to pick up. So, I mean, there's a little bit of lightning in the bottle for sure, but I think it's pretty cool. I love hearing those stories of like guys who came from an idea and executed it well.
No, absolutely. And I think, when I've heard of this story in the past, and I was kind of like taking a look at some threads and stuff. I mean, this guy, not only did he kind of start from scratch, he was literally like sewing the clothes initially, right? To distribute and coming up with the designs and concepts. Yeah. I did a LinkedIn post recently, which is about kind of, being in the trenches and being creative and getting your hands dirty and just learning. And, the people who are kind of willing to roll their sleeves like that typically win, whether it's this first idea or the 20th. But, having the hustle, having the insight, going out and, just being maniacal about trying to kind of, win in the space are probably the tactics you need. And I'm curious about another thing, maybe this dovetails well into the conversation, maybe not. So we could go in a different way if you think, but I feel like there's a lot of cool tools now. So people are like, okay, well, what type of business do I even start? I have an interest in kind of starting something. I've been doing some reading and maybe have like some other tactics as well. People who basically what they do is they'll go to Reddit, they'll look at like some niches, they'll kind of pull out some insights there. Then they'll go into one of the LLMs like, ChatGPT or Claude, say, okay, based on these insights, like what's missing in the space, help me come up with like a product offering that could work well. They take that, They then go and look at a TikTok and TikTok shop and see what's being sold in different product categories. Like you can add a bit of science and using these tools too to kind of figure stuff out if you're just super enterprising and the actual item or whatever you're trying to build is less important than just trying to find out like where there's interest. So have you seen anything else like that or any kind of like tactics? Like what would you do if you were kind of looking for a new idea?
Yeah, I think the scale is an issue. I definitely think there's like arbitrage opportunities there, but like, they're going to be such a grind in terms of building a brand from scratch. Like, if you say I'm going to start a brand and I'm going to build it out and have it be standalone, the product needs to be good. If you're just screen printing on a tee, that's a standard tee that you can buy. Anyone can do that, but you can make some money, but I think it's going to be short lived. So if you're really trying to build a brand, you're going to have to like evolve as time goes. And I'm wearing one as well.
Sure.
That was one that we designed and packed and shipped and screen printed in the garage and made. And it's tough. Like if you're not on it all the time and evolving and scaling over and over, it becomes a grind and like you're going to hit a serious ceiling if you don't think about it properly. So I think, as you said, you really got to be on it and understand and think about the future of what do you want to do? Are you cool with making a couple $1,000s a month? If so, then you can grind and do that. But if you're trying to build $1 billion business, scale is the thing you need to really think about as you're growing. Like, does the thing I'm doing, can it apply to more niches, more people? How do I continue to grow this thing? That's where the money is. Unfortunately, if you're in it for like truly brand building and dollars and growth, then you've got to think about scale constantly. Like, how do I do this? You can't be one person in your garage and expect to do 100,000
Yeah.
teas a night, right?
I think that's a really fair point. I think that probably makes the point of like, yeah, there are a lot of different ideas that you can go after, but at least unless you're really interested in a space and have a unique insight, and can really understand kind of like the right channels to kind of grow and have that, ability to kind of, decrease your costs or whatever, because you just have like kind of unique access or skills. You probably need that in order to go for the $1 billion. Because if you're just kind of like making it up and doing the other research stuff, not that it can't happen, but that's a way harder path to like a venture scale type of business.
Yeah, like those drop shipping companies, they go through, they try this, they make some money. As that money declines, they're trying new things and they're reinvesting and they're trying. So it's just a roller coaster of like, this month I made this, whatever, marbles were hot and I made a bunch of marbles and that trend went away and I jumped on the next trend. And that is a cycle and a grind that you got to stay on. It's not one of these set and forget type brands, which I think a lot of people think I'm going to start this and then it's going to be, I'm going to be on easy street because then the money's just going to roll in and then it happens like that. Truthfully, right? Like it's like a plant. You need to water and seed and resoil, and every season that comes around, when you pluck those plants, you need to have the next set ready. So it is not easy. I think with experience, that's why I said starting in 2012 was probably a huge advantage because he had gone through those trends, not when it was crazy. And when 2019, 2020 came and it was really time, he had gone through enough lumps that he could probably weather that storm and get things out the door and really move, which is awesome.
I think that's really insightful, Wells, because like, I think that there's, in addition to kind of a story around, finding unique insight and hustle and grit, et cetera, it's how long you're willing to work on a problem so that when the time comes around where it's like, you can really take advantage of either distribution channels or, crazy macro events going on in the world, et cetera, you kind of set up, your business is finally kind of set up to take advantage of that. I mean, that's not something that you're going to get unless you're like, 5, 10 years into doing something where you've seen a lot of different cycles and things like that. And then you can finally position yourself well. I think that's a really important insight.
Yeah, we talked about it in our holiday episode, right? Like, what helps having gone through a holiday already and understanding the data, right? If you don't have that, you're kind of just, you're going to have to like power through it and figure it out as you go. I mean, maybe you can hit a home run, but that's tough, right? You're going to have to jump in there and sort of take some lumps and learn. And then I think if you have the mindset, like, this is my passion, I'm going to figure it out. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
That sets you up because then it's not about this. I'm quitting my job and this has to make money for me. It is more like, this is what I love to do. Even if I don't make money on it, I'm happy working on it. That's kind of where I see a lot of success, right? People that are like, yeah, it doesn't, I don't need this to be a $1 billion company, but I need this to keep me happy, like, and motivated. So
Yeah.
that's what I
Or I
think.
just really want to solve this problem. And like, regardless of what
Yeah.
happens, whether I, am make a crazy amount of money or not, I can't sleep at night without trying to figure this out. So, that's probably another path to being really successful in something.
Similar to what NVIDIA and Jensen always talks about it, which is a good segue into our next
Yeah.
biggest topic in tech right now. What is that?
So this past weekend, for any of y'all who are like on X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it now, and a bunch of other social media platforms, all these rumblings from these Silicon Valley luminaries talking about DeepSeek and what's going on with that model and what it is and how, why is it such a big deal within the space right now? And so, yeah, we could definitely jump into kind of like the biggest news story of the week, which is around DeepSeek. So some of you may have, more or less familiarity with DeepSeek. I'm going to go through a bit of like, what is it? Like what happened in markets, kind of What's going on. And then, I'd love your, you to opine a bit on what you think is happening. But just to kind of level set. So, DeepSeek is a Chinese AI startup that I think has actually been, the founder of the startup has been working on, LLMs and models for at least 5+ years. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, it came out of nowhere and it's a team. Well, typically people are working on these ideas for a really long time. But the technology is basically these large language models, which is the same technology that underpins chatbots like ChatGPT, Gemini. It's within the same vein. For people who were not super familiar with trying to figure out what like the UI is like, the experience, it's basically that same type of interface where you ask questions and then the model tries to process it and get you the best answer. And so the reason why there's a lot of kind of compounding factors of why DeepSeek is so hot right now. I think some of it has to do with kind of all the conversations going on about AI and tech generally and China's influence in TikTok, et cetera. So it's kind of like within an existing trend right now. But a lot of waves were made yesterday because of one of the accomplishments that I think they wrote a research paper over the weekend where they had been able to create a very powerful AI model with far less money than experts thought was, possible, as well as without using kind of the most advanced NVIDIA chips to kind of do all the compute. And this caused a bomb to be dropped on the stock market and also the Valley. World's top tech companies typically train their chatbots with supercomputers that need like 16,000 chips or more in order to do it. And what DeepSeek's engineers, at least what they said in the research paper and in the news that's gone out, they only use 2,000 NVIDIA chips. So it's like, relative the moment, try to be a lot of analogies on this, but it's kind of like the analogy is like if a team, I heard one person say, it's like if somebody built an iPhone for $20, it's kind of like the impact relative to the space and AI for those who are less technical to kind of really understand the impact. And, why it's important is because within the space, there's huge barriers to entry and these models that are like closed and only the top companies can kind of afford to do it, acquire the number of chips and compute necessary to do it. But now what this is saying is these engineers who had incredible ingenuity within China are able to kind of like, make these chips way more, efficient based off of like the software layer and the way that they were able to figure out how to get the models to figure out answers with the new process that made it way more efficient. And now, this is open source. So any company can kind of use this. So I know you heard about the news and, curious your thoughts about like what this means for the Valley and rumblings that you've heard. And then also if you think it's good or bad for the space generally.
Yeah. I mean, I bought some stock yesterday when it all dipped because I always think it's an overreaction to the things that are happening. But it was interesting to read about it because it's essentially they did a lot more with a lot less in less time than everyone else. So I think it's good news, right? Because people are going to innovate and they're going to, imagine what these guys can do with the new chips and more power. It seems like they're going to be able to offer a heck of a lot more AI and computing power. So we'll see what happens. I think, when you were going through that story, the comparison I can think of is, when the automakers were taking over the US, there was like an engineer who designed a new catalytic converter that basically took gas fumes and could make vehicle engines run for like 200 miles a gallon. And he published his findings and they tested it and it came out, and the next day the market reacted and like the market tanked, oil prices were down, all the car stocks were down. Everybody thought this is the end no, now you can go 200 miles on a gallon. It's over. There's so many businesses that tumbled because of that, and it feels like that, right? It's just like an overreaction of like, oh my god, now because of this, we don't need, and ultimately that, I guess, conspiracies were about the catalytic converter never came out. It never materialized. I think the guy who had the patents disappeared. Just oddly enough, you should go look it up. It's pretty interesting. He disappeared, or he was murdered, something like that, and then someone else had a similar patent and created something similar, which was with steam, and he was murdered as well. So this is the history of America.
Turning conspiracy show now. I love it.
Yeah, no, crazy. I mean, so it's happened in the past, right? But I like DeepSeek, the combination of being like a Chinese company. I think a lot of people think, oh, this is China making. It's not China. It's a company that's in China. It's nothing to do with the government. They created it. They designed it. They publish open source. So this is very different than anything we see. I think they're just giving an example of what can be done. And it kind of shows you how we're still early in this whole AI computing,
I think
business.
that's the biggest. Yeah, that's the biggest
Yeah.
piece. Is you have all these players that spent billions and billions of dollars on the hardware and data centers, et cetera. And like you have this small team kind of come out of nowhere and make waves. One of the things that's been really interesting about the conversation, and I don't know how close you've been following it, but there have been some folks who are like, how do we know for sure how many NVIDIA chips they use to do it? They said 2,000, but it's another country. Like it could be way more. You never know.
Right.
And that, that piece of made me kind of think, well, is this all smoke and mirrors, or is this actually, a huge stride? I think it is. I think relative to how they're processing the information on the chips relative to like all the other models in terms of the efficiency piece and bringing out the cost, that is true. But they may have trained with more chips. I guess we'll have to see. Another thing I wanted to just touch on really quickly to play a bit of a devil's advocate point on what you said with this, that this is net good in other countries, and not that it's perfect in the U.S., but there are a lot lower standards on like safety within AI, right? And who knows kind of what kind of safeguards they have, et cetera. Obviously, it's within the Chinese
security.
search Tiananmen Square and things like that. I think you're going to get some wonky answers, but just in terms of like other ways they're training the model, et cetera, the safety may not be as much on the forefront. And I think because they've been able to catch up in a lot of ways to these U.S. models, which were thought to have like a huge moat or a huge head start, I wonder if that's going to degrade safety with these companies because they're going to keep going faster and faster. Then that leads into this situation where we have these rampant AI systems where no one really actually knows what's going on, and it starts to negatively impact society. So I think it's not good for innovation, but I'm also like, I think like the safety piece, the stuff that we can't really see is important to be thoughtful about. So
Yes.
yeah, I don't know if you agree with that or disagree, or
I mean, I think because it's so early, it seems like right now everybody is at an arms race to make their own version of AI and develop, instead of working together, making it open source like OpenAI was originally intended to do. Now everyone's doing it on their own for profit, which I think, that's like any business industry that is budding. Everyone's going to get in and try to build their own and put their mark on it. So I think that's kind of where we are, right? Ultimately, where it pans out is probably going to be somebody that's head and shoulders, or maybe there's just a lot of different versions of AI that when you're in Facebook, you use theirs. When you're in X, you use theirs. When you're on, there's just going to be different ones that work differently. And that's just something that we have to live with. Seems like it could be a while of that world.
yeah.
I don't know if that's bad. I still like, it's so early. I can't get a good read on it. What is your take? What are your thoughts? Do you think we all need one AI to speak for us all, or do you think everyone's going to have it? It's okay to have a bunch of versions of this thing.
I've been trying to think a fair amount about this in terms of like, where does the value accrue? Because you have other models, like let's talk about like web services, for example, where you have kind of three main players. You have like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, et cetera, is like somewhat of an adjacent example. And even there, you don't have kind of winner. You have winner takes most. You don't have winner takes all there. I think now, relative to what's required to make these models in terms of like the investment, and now with these new strides with DeepSeek, you're going to have a ton of different models that exist, and some are better at some things, other better at other things. I think where the differentiator is going to be is not at the. I mean, you could say certain things about the application layer. Like I use ChatGPT because I like that interface, and is it that much different than Claude, et cetera? Like Probably not, but for me, it kind of works. So there's probably some value there, but really a lot of them are just wrappers. So I think that, AI wrapper, like they just kind of wrap around the,
Yep.
existing
The UI.
like the UI around the models and how you interface with them. But I think where the value long term is going to accrue to are, the platform that have the most robust and dynamic data sets of new information, kind of like the Reddits of the world, and then what companies have access to those data sets, either through partnerships, et cetera, that create that incremental access to new data that help that result in their models performing even better. And there's probably like a counterpoint to that, which I can chat about as well. But is that square with your thinking on like what the differentiator is?
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, I heard Bezos talking about it in a interview, and he said basically he's back full time at Amazon just working on AI. He said it's very horizontal today, but there are so many applications that he's like, hey, how we recommend AI and how we use it, how you search, every single thing you think about has some vertical in that AI needs to be developed specifically for Amazon. So I think you're right. That we're just going to have to wait and see. And everyone's going to kind of develop it for every little niche that is going to make it sort of useful for everyone. But maybe that layer that we're going to use it for as an everyday consumer is going to be very different from a B2B AI or a B2C AI. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
See it about where it goes.
Yeah, I think, net, and I talk about the safety concerns, I do have legitimate concerns about it, but I think net for consumers, it's just going to drive down costs to use all these models, which I think is amazing, right? Like you put down these models that are going to be either free or very low expense, and then you give the world's knowledge and access to people, low income backgrounds, trying to learn something new, or countries and societies around the globe that need, where you can like do education in a scalable way and give people access to knowledge and teaching, et cetera, that is super profound. We talked a little bit about that before. So I think that's really cool when, AI becomes like almost like electricity. Everybody just kind of has access. I like that type of world. We'll just have to see, how far we push it. And for every positive use case, there are nefarious actors. And you think about the power of the algorithms, the speed at which some of these kind of text to image and, HeyGen and Synesthesia and all these other platforms are able to kind of manipulate AI and it kind of creates both these two types of worlds, which I'm not sure which one we're ultimately going to end up in. I'm an optimist. I'm hoping it's in a more positive situation, but we'll have to see.
I mean, I can't help but just think, where does this go in the long term? And it's scary. Like, I know everyone talks, oh my God, the Terminator 2, but I think ultimately it's like we're building something that's going to be smarter than us. Ultimately, like that's where we're just going. We're going to a place where this AI software thing is just going to be smarter than us and know more and have access and compute. May not have the judgment and all the character and the humanity of man. So we think. I don't know, but it's like we're getting there. We're building towards that. I just don't know what happens. Like that's my biggest thing. That's where I'm throwing my hands up. Like, all right, I guess we're going down this path, and we're gonna see. I don't know if I'm gonna see it, but like it seems like we're going down that path. That's kind of terrifying.
I know, totally, and I feel like this has been a time in tech where I've been like the most anxious and excited because there's new tools and things to play around with like literally every day. I feel like, I'm finding new. At the same time, what I've tried to do from a career perspective and also kind of interest within tech and the space of just being on Silicon Valley is try to think, 5-10 years down the lane. All right, if this is what's happening now, what does that mean for humanity or where we're at in tech? And not being super profound, but just trying to position myself thoughtfully and professionally to take advantage of trends. And it feels increasingly difficult to do that with context from the actual technology and then macro events and economic events. Anybody who's saying they got it all figured out, like I don't believe it, but it's crazy, man, just how quickly things are changing.
I agree. That's what makes me, I want to say worried, but I agree. There's something in the air that feels like, I don't know. I'd like it for the first time, you don't know where this is going. I think in the past, you're kind of like, Amazon and pets.com and all these things, you look down the line, it doesn't feel as scary. Just like, oh, we're going to connect all these things are going to be on the internet, be more convenient. Like this, this whole other animal.
Placement, various actors from other countries who were oppositional toward us. Like, a whole host of things, can happen, but let's be optimistic, I guess.
Yeah. That's all we can do, right? It's going to be a fun ride to figure this thing out and see where we ultimately land. Let's, like you said, fingers crossed that it goes. We'll keep our ear to the ground and keep thinking of things and hoping for the best.
Yeah. As always, we'll be, as on a weekly basis, if possible, if we can. That's the cadence we're trying to keep up with, keeping you apprised on the latest in the space. Again, we'd love any feedback on comments. Obviously, like and subscribe to the content if you're enjoying it, but we want constructive criticism as well. And hey, I'm feeling this and not this. You guys should focus on. So we're always willing to get that, and we've gotten great feedback from our friends.
Yeah, shout out. It's similar to what Dave texted and was like, "Hey, you guys should talk. I'm curious about this. How did the Gymshark thing happen?" So if you have stuff like that, you don't want to, do the deep dive, we'll do it. And I think it's a great sort of exercise for us to figure out. Happy to do that. Maybe we'll find some guests to come on as well, right?
Definitely that. One other thing we talked about at the beginning of the year, we were trying to do some of our editorial planning or different ideas. We want to try some different formats as well. So if you think, obviously like interviewing, but maybe some man on the street type of stuff, maybe you'll see me and T-Dub out in your hood at some point with the microphone.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Yeah. Also, maybe we need to do something at some of our homies' places, like around best places to eat, best offices and stuff like that. And we could maybe
get you a look inside some of these offices if they allow that. That'd be great.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Okay. All right. Until next time.
Until next time, brother.